For me, Ace in Action was a bit of an unexpected playthrough, as I was just expecting it to be even worse than the original, but I quickly realized that it really couldn't get any worse. This game doesn't really stand out in an extraordinary way, but it does make for a better video game in my opinion, as a big chunk of my complaints I had for the original were somewhat answered and fulfilled in this one. Now don't think just because you tick a box to a problem your game turns into a masterpiece. As for Ace in Action, it only turned into a simple action game. In this video, I will be going over what makes for a simple action game through the lens of its story and gameplay. The first thing I will be going over is the simplistic story. So right off the bat, after Ace brags to the audience of how successful their last missions were, they are contacted through a distress call from a prison located on Pluto. It turns out someone is overrunning a prison. Now for some reason the story kind of sidetracks to the ugly duckling reading the description of the game they're playing. So essentially right from the get-go you know that there won't be much consequences, and this won't at all affect Chicken Little or any of the characters, as this is a fictional video game inside of a fictional video game. So just like that, no matter what happens, nothing really will make you sad or happy, as no emotion really matter, since the characters from the video game are basically just used mainly for telling corny jokes and blowing stuff up. So you may ask, doesn't that make this game terrible then? Well, my answer would be yes, the story is terrible, but I would make the argument that a simple action game doesn't rely heavily upon its story, more so its gameplay. But I do think this is a simple story for action games. That's why I wouldn't lower its grade based on its story as much as I would per se a movie, mostly because a movie is more heavily based on the story than a video game is. Anyway, after Ace makes his way through the prison, the antagonist is revealed, Foxy Loxy, who is revealed to have been romantically involved with Ace. It doesn't really explain why Foxy does what she does. It only gives off a sense that she's just mad at Ace for their breakup, which is only really talked about and not shown throughout the game. Now I don't want to get too deep into the story of this game, mostly because the game developers themselves don't really seem to take themselves seriously either, but I think this game does offer what a simple video game story looks like. So Foxy ends up escaping through a spaceship with the help of the invaders. After her escape, Fish tracks their last transmission signal, which was located near a laboratory inside of Saturn. So off to Saturn they go. The simplicity I found through this is that the story is really straightforward. It's you, the protagonist, chasing around the antagonist from place to place, or in this case, planet to planet, which doesn't make a game terrible, only I would say simple. This has been done many times before, and there aren't any other story elements to make this extraordinary. The positive thing that comes from going from place to place is all the different enemies and environments you come across. It doesn't make the game feel as dull and repetitive throughout the entire game, but for the story to me, it just seemed the game tried to give you the feeling of advancing the plot, so the characters don't feel like they're stuck in one place the entire time. Immediately when they arrive inside the laboratory, they're kind of just attacked from the get-go. There wasn't really any stealth or figuring out what was going on. You kind of just have to shoot your way through the laboratory to find out what happens next, which is, if you're not catching on, really simplistic. Every character other than your crew you come across is a bad guy you have to take down, and they all work for Foxy, so a lot of motivation or character development I would say is already predicted. It's just I work for Foxy because she'll give me stuff or I don't have a choice. So after the crew makes it through Saturn, they figure out Goosey is the one storing all the precious gas for Foxy. Since Goosey is located on Mars, off to Mars they go. Similar to Saturn and Pluto, you just really shoot your way through all the enemies and only find out key information the moment you defeat the antagonist. After you defeat the almighty Goosey, the duckling somehow ends up being captured by Foxy. And I think the game was trying to raise the stakes to not just the Earth is at risk, but also Abby is. It's hard for you to feel anything, probably because their relationship isn't taken seriously, and also I never get to see what this version of Earth is. I don't even know what I would be saving. Is the Earth filled with just animals, or are there humans? Because in that case, Foxy demands basically total control of everything, or she'll destroy Earth by launching the moon into it. A very simple motivation a lot of action stories have done before, but nevertheless when Ace blows all of his enemies to bits, he faces Foxy, which then reveals what she has done to Abby, which really shows how goofy the developers want this game to be, which is fair I guess, but it still doesn't excuse how simple this game is. Then after a few of Foxy's mini-boss levels, the story comes to a basic end. The moon doesn't blow up Earth, and Foxy is imprisoned once again, with no character arc or really nothing changing since the beginning. as once again, Ace just looks for more glory and Foxy is back in prison. This, I think, is a very simple video game action story, as I think the game really revealed its true intentions halfway through the story.
Doing?
Skipping the movie.
We could be missing vital information.
Come on, they're boring and never advance the plot.
Abby's right. How can you care for the safety of your crew and not know the next objective? You just ignore information like it's a 40-day-old bag of stale potato chips. They're putting their lives on the line for you!
Runt.
I'll be quiet now.
Look, I just want to blow stuff up.
Alright, so let's go over the part you were blowing stuff up. The game has 3 different characters you play as. You play as Ace, Runt, and Abby, each having a different playstyle. Abby rides around in a spaceship, while Runt rides around in his tank, and Ace does all the groundwork. I'm going to start with a general overview of common themes I found throughout the game, no matter what character you play as. Then after that, I'll be getting into more specifics. The most simple thing starting with this game is the currency system. Throughout the game, you collect golden acorns that will unlock you some stuff in the shop. Now in the shop, you have music, concept art, minigames, and upgrades for each different character. The most worthwhile being the upgrades. It sounds like a good system. Well, yes, in theory. The shop would be useful if all the enemies you face weren't so weak and caused absolutely no damage to you. It didn't help that there's no option for a more difficult mode, as most of the levels were an easy breeze through, whether you bought upgrades or not. The upgrades include increasing damage to your primary weapon, adding another secondary weapon, or increasing your health. All of these for the most part would make you basically invincible, which actually didn't really matter in the broad scale of things, mostly because there's almost no punishment for dying. You just respawn with all of your health back closer to the place you died. So in this game, some parts of the level dying actually helped you, especially when you're just about to fight against a strong enemy. So the shop was there to improve your character, not because the levels would get harder, but because you would then kill the enemies faster. Now how do you acquire these acorns? Well, you just blow stuff up. That's mostly what I did anyway. Let's talk about the simple bonuses. For the bonus, most missions have 5 big acorns, 5 hidden shootables, and a time clock. If you shoot all 5 shootables, you get a bonus of golden acorns at the end. Same goes with the hidden acorns, and for the time clock, you just have to complete the mission in a certain amount of time. Now I think the time clock is a fine addition to the game, but for the other bonuses, they weren't worth it at all. Not only was there more of an efficient way of farming for acorns, some bonuses through the missions could only be collected if you already practically beat the game, as you needed a gadget that can only be unlocked toward the end of the main story. So not only did the bonuses have basically no value, you couldn't even collect them all even if you wanted to. Alright, let's talk about the skill in this game. For the most part, the only skill that existed was the shooting and the movement. Now for the shooting, there was a little skill, as all the characters mostly auto-locked onto the enemy once their sights were in its vicinity. It was just a matter how fast you smash a button, or after an upgrade hold it. I found most of the skill being in the movement, having to avoid enemy attacks based on reaction speed or pattern recognition, especially when you have to play as Fish. The absolute concentration you needed for it was so rewarding. Now for the movement, I may make it sound special, but as I'm saying, this is simple. Almost every game has a movement mechanic. Chicken Little Ace in Action doesn't do anything new here. These are just simple things I would expect from a Disney game studio. Just like I would expect new gadgets and new concepts be added to keep things interesting. So as I was playing as Ace, I think a very somewhat universally good decision they made was the uniqueness to all of the enemies. Each had a different way of attacking, and they all were unique and distinguishable from each other. I especially noticed this when I was going from planet to planet. There were a lot of differences between the environment and also the enemies you had to destroy. Some did more damage, some attacks were harder to avoid, and some of the enemies had a lot of health. Beside the point, I think they did a good job of making unique enemies, so the game didn't feel so repetitive. I wish I could say the same for the gadgets. Ace had 2 major ones I found to somewhat change your experience. It would be the hover pack and the claw boots. The hover pack tested your aim, as all the movement you had was limited. You couldn't move side to side as you usually would, it was all up to your aim. You had to destroy all your enemies before you'd land on the other side, which I can say confidently that I didn't die once using it. Now for the claw boots. They made the game a little different in its own way. Your movement was limited and so was your aim. Ace was able to claw into certain material that would help him get to certain areas of the map, just like the hover pack. But for the claw boots, I only really found some value with it going down, as you'd have to time your jump trying to avoid the lasers, so your HP wouldn't be as low down below for what was waiting for you. It required concentration and timing if you at all cared about perfection. When I crawled on the wall, it felt a little different, but not enough to be game changing. For the other characters, I'm not going to get into each gadget, mostly because, well, let's just say they had almost the same level of game changing gadgets than Ace's. Now overall, I think this game does a good job of making each mission unique and distinguishable from each other. They all had different objectives and different ways of completing that objective, while also keeping the gameplay consistent and staying core to its space theme. I'm not going to be getting into every little aspect or mission of what was done right and what wasn't, as I think overall, if you play this game, you'll have a very good understanding of what makes for what I think is a simple action game. If you disagree with me, tell me how I'm wrong or what a simple video game looks like to you. I'm open to other people's opinions and suggestions. Oh yeah, one last thing. Thanks for watching.